Hey, welcome everybody. It is GleeCon here. The start of a brand new day and the start of a brand new book. The third in our trilogy that we're currently on. Kind of did some research today too, and just getting some foresight into how it's going to be going. And we got a lot of books. There is a lot of books in the Warcraft universe, so we've got quite a bit of content stretching out ahead of us. There's a decent amount that's going to come even before we get to orcs and humans. So we're just going to see how it goes and take us there as much as we can. But we're making good progress right now as we lead up to orcs and humans. And we have this first episode, the first episode, this first chapter of the third book in the War of the Ancients trilogy. This book is called The Sundering. And I guess we're going to begin with a prologue. Depending on how long it is, we might do prologue and chapter 1 today. Let's see. Okay, so stay a while and listen. We'll find out just how much of a while that is after this prologue. A primal fury raged all about him, relentlessly ripping at him from all sides. Fire, water, earth, and air, all tingled with raw, uncontrolled magic, spun around him in a madcap fashion. The strain to simply remain in one place threatened to tear him asunder, yet he held. He could do no less. Past his gaze soared countless scenes, countless objects. An endless wild panorama of time assailed his senses. There were landscapes, battles, and creatures even he could not name. He heard the voices of every being who had, did, and would exist. Every noise ever caused thundered in his ears. Colors unbelievable blinded his eyes. And most unsettling throughout it all, he saw himself. Himself in each moment of existence, stretching forth from almost the birth of time to beyond its death. He might have taken heart from that, save that every aspect of him was posed in the same contorted manner as he was. Every existence of him struggled to keep not just his world, but all reality from collapsing into chaos. Nozdormu shook his head and roared his agony and frustration. He wore the form of a dragon, a huge golden bronze leviathan who seemed as much made of the sands of time as he was scaled flesh. His eyes were gleaming gemstones the color of the sun. His claws were glittering diamonds. He was the aspect of time, one of the 5 great entities who watched over the world of Azeroth, keeping it in balance and protecting it from danger within and without. Those who had formed the world had created him and his counterparts, and of Nozdormu they had granted particular powers. I guess the Titans did that? I can't quite recall. He could see the myriad paths of the future and delve into the intricacies of the past. He swam the river of time as others did the air. Yet now Nozdormu barely held disaster in check, even though he had the aid of himself countless times over. Where does it lie? The aspect asked of himself, not for the first time. Where is the cause? He had some general notion, but still not any specifics. When Nozdormu had sensed the unraveling of reality, he had come to this place to investigate, only to discover that he had barely arrived in time to prevent the destruction of everything. However, once caught up in that task, the aspect realized that he could do no more on his own. To that end, the behemoth had turned to one whose power he dwarfed 1,000-fold, but whose ingenuity and dedication had proven him as able as any of the Great Five. Nozdormu had contacted the red dragon Corielstrasz, consort of the aspect of life Alexstrasza, in a fragmented vision. He had managed to send the other Leviathan, who wore the guise of the wizard Krasis, to investigate one of the outward signs of the growing catastrophe and perhaps find a way to reverse the terrible situation. But the anomaly that Corielstrasz and his human protege Ronan had searched for in the eastern mountains had instead engulfed them. Sensing their sudden nearness, Nozdormu had cast them into the time period from which he suspected the cause. He knew that they survived, but beyond that, what success they had managed appeared negligible. And so while the aspect hoped for their quest, he still searched as best he could himself. Straining his powers to their limits, the massive dragon continued to follow every manifestation of the chaos. He fought past the swirling visions of orcs on the rampage, kingdoms rising and declining, violent volcanic upheavals, but still could find no clue. No, there was at last something different, something that seemed to be influencing the madness. Power subtly radiated from a nexus far, far from him. Nozdormu pursued the faint trace as a shark would its prey, his senses diving through the monstrous maelstrom of time. More than once he thought he had lost it, but somehow managed to pick up the trail again. Then slowly a vague force coalesced before him. There was a familiar sense to it, one that almost made him reject the truth, when at last it was revealed. Nozdormu hesitated, certain that he had to be mistaken. The source could not be this. Such a thing could not be possible. Before Nozdormu emanated a vision of the Well of Eternity. The black lake churned with as much turmoil as the rest of the aspect's surroundings. Violent flashes of pure magic battled over its dark waters, and then he heard the whispering voices. At first Nozdormu took them for the voices of demons, the voices of the Burning Legion, but he was well familiar with such and quickly dismissed that line of reasoning. No, the evil he felt dripping from these whisperers was more ancient, more malevolent, the old gods. The primal forces continued to rip at his very being, but Nozdormu ignored his pain, caught up in his discovery. Here at last Nozdormu believed the key to the catastrophe lay. Whether or not it was still within his power to affect matters he could not say, but at least if he was able to discover the truth, there might be a chance for Koilstrasz to yet succeed. Nozdormu probed the lake further. He was better aware than most that what appeared a body of water was in fact so many things more. Mortal creatures could not comprehend the full scope of it. Even his fellow aspects likely did not understand the waters as well as Nozdormu did, and he knew that there were secrets hidden to him. Visually, it was as if he flew over the black depths. In actuality, however, Nozdormu's mind plied a different realm. He battled a labyrinth of interlocking forces that shielded the core of that which was called the Well from Revelation. Almost it was as if either the waters themselves were alive, or something had so insinuated itself into the well that it was now part of it. Again, Nozdormu thought of the demons, the Burning Legion, and their desire to use the Well of Eternity's power to open the way and eradicate all life on Azeroth. Yet this was too shrewd for them, even their master Sargeras. A sense of unease swelled within him as he wound his way through. Several times the aspect almost became trapped. There were false paths, alluring trails, all designed to forever bind him to the well and devour his power, his essence. Nozdormu moved with utmost caution. To become trapped would not only mean his demise, but perhaps also the end of all things. Deeper and deeper he dove. The intensity of the forces making up the well astounded him. The power the dragon sensed brought back memories of the creators whose ancient glory made Nozdormu the equivalent of a slug climbing out of the mud. Were they somehow tied to the well's secrets? The visual image still remained of him hovering just above the shadowed surface. Only he and the well had any stability in this place beyond the mortal plane. The waters floated in space, a bottomless lake stretching worlds across. He drew closer to the violent surface. On the mortal plane, it should have reflected at least some of his image, but all Nozdormu saw was blackness. His mind reached deeper yet, burrowing along, closing in on the core and the truth. And then tendrils of inky water stretched up and seized his wings, limbs, and neck. The aspect barely reacted in time to keep himself from being dragged under. He struggled against the watery tentacles, but they held him fast. All four limbs were trapped, and the tentacle around his throat tightened, cutting off his breath. Nozdormu understood that these perceptions were only illusion, but they were powerful ones representing the truth. His mind had been snared by that which lurked in the well. If he did not free himself quickly, he would be just as dead as if the illusions were real. Nozdormu exhaled, and a stream of sand turned the well into a glittering display. The tentacles jerked, slackened. They withered, the magic that had created them worn and old. But as they collapsed, others darted forth. Expecting this, Nozdormu flapped hard, rising swiftly. 4 black limbs slashed futilely, then sank. But the dragon suddenly jerked, his tail snagged by a tendril from behind. As Nozdormu turned to deal with it, more shot out. They jutted up from every direction, this time so many that the aspect could not avoid them all. He swatted away one, then another, and then became trapped by more than a dozen, each binding him with monstrous strength. The dragon was inexorably drawn toward the swirling well. A maelstrom formed beneath him. Nozdormu felt its horrific suction even from above. The gap between the aspect and the waters narrowed. Then the maelstrom changed. The waves rushing around its edges grew jagged, then hardened. The center deepened, yet from it issued forth what at first appeared another, albeit different tendril. It was long, sinewy, and as it rose up toward him, its tip blossomed into 3 sharpened points. A mouth. Nozdormu's golden eyes widened. His struggles grew more adamant. The demonic maw opened hungrily as the tentacles forced him toward it. The tongue lashed at his muzzle, its very touch searing harshly his hide. And the whispers from within the well grew more virulent, more eager, distinctive voices that sent a chill through the aspect. Yes, these were more than demons. Again he breathed the sands of time upon the tendrils, but now they cascaded off the black limbs as if simple dust. Nozdormu twisted, attempting to get even one of the tendrils loose, but they held on to him with a vampiric passion. This did not sit well with the aspect. As the essence of time, he had been granted by his creators with the knowledge of his own demise. That had been given as a lesson, so that he would never think his power so great and terrible that he had to answer to no other. Nozdormu knew exactly how he would perish and win, and this was not that moment, but he could not free himself. That's kind of neat. The tongue coiled around his muzzle, tightening its grip so much that Nozdormu felt as if his jawbones were cracking. Again he reminded himself that this was all illusion, but knowing that did nothing to stop either the agony or the anxiety, the latter eating away within him in a manner he had never experienced. He was almost at the teeth. They gnashed together, clearly in part to unnerve him, and succeeding. The strain of also holding together the bonds of reality put further stress to his thoughts. How much more simple just to let the well take him and be done with all the effort. No, Nozdormu suddenly thought. A notion came to him, a desperate one. He did not know if he had the power to make it pass, but there was little other choice. The aspect's body shimmered. He seemed to withdraw into himself. The scene turned backward. Every motion made reversed itself. The tongue unrolled from his muzzle. He inhaled the sands. The tendrils undid themselves, drawing back into the black waters. And the moment that happened, Nozdormu halted the reversal, then immediately withdrew his mind from the well. Once more he floated in the river of time, barely keeping reality cohesive. The titanic effort took even more of a toll now that he had expended himself in his disastrous search, but somehow the aspect found the strength to continue. He had touched upon the evil corrupting the well and knew more than ever that failure would bring worse than destruction. Nozdormu now recognized them for what they were. Even the horrific fury of the burning legion paled in comparison, and there was nothing the aspect could do to stop their intentions. He barely could keep the chaos in check. He no longer even had the will to reach out to the others, assuming he could have even done so. There was no other hope then, only the same one as ever, and yet that seemed so slight, so insignificant now that Nozdormu could barely take heart in it. It is all up to them, he thought as the raw forces toward him. It is all up to Coriel Strauss and his human. All right, so I think that's neat that we are checking in with Nozdormu. The reason why I'm clicking back is, one, I wanted to see this cover. We know Illidan is here. I think that's Ronan. That's probably like a little thing that we're going to read. So when we see the old gods waited, and then but only a little. Book 3 of the trilogy. The reason why is I wanted to look at this 2018. So here's why I'm thinking that. Think about what's happening in 2018. October 2018. BFA is coming out. So as this book is being published and coming out here, Battle for Azeroth is coming out, which is all about the old gods. So that's why I think we're now starting to, we've gone through Legion, we've done all these Legion ties, and now we're getting into the BFA stuff, and we're going to tie into that. So I think the context of when these books are written to his nephew Brandon, matters. Oh, okay. There are only 23 chapters this time around, but this time there was also a prologue. So I think that kind of counts. All right, so even though this is a little bit of a shorty, I'm going to count that for us, especially since there's only 23, and this will still keep like a 24 episode format. All right, I'm glad that we've checked in with Nozdormu. I think it's interesting that we're going to tie this old god stuff in, and let's find out where we go in this final book. Another episode in Pipes 5x5. Thank you as always for listening, guys, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Lore of Warcraft.